call this Altoona City Council work session to order. We will now have a moment of silent prayer. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, we will now open up the floor for public comment. If anybody would like to address council, you may do so by calling the number on the screen. Is it on the screen? Okay. And when asked to give your name, please give your name and address for the record, please. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will close the floor and move on to our discussion items. The first one being the Altoona Water Authority Penvest loans, and joining us via conference call, we have Jens Domgaard. Jens?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for putting me on top of your agenda. It's much appreciated. I didn't know if anyone is also attending for the Altoona Water Authority.
There's not, no.
Okay, well, I guess I'm speaking in their behalf as well. I'm just, I guess the authority respectfully requests that City Council include on its agenda for its next 2 council meetings, consideration and then final enactment of 2 ordinances that will reflect city's support for 2 Penvest loans that were just awarded last week to the Water Authority. They're very generous offers of financial assistance. You'll recall how Penvest works. It's a state agency providing low interest loans for water and sewer projects. The first project is a sewer project. And it's, again, I'm not the best to actually talk about the details of the project, but it's so-called biosolids treatment process that the authority is going to make improvements to its treatment plant to better treat various solids that have a high biological oxygen demand. And one of that I understand, it's things like food waste that comes from.
Jens, are you referring to the anaerobic digester project that the Water Authority is doing? Is that what the request is for?
I'm not sure, Mayor. It's called the biosolids treatment. It's for food waste primarily. It's a source of revenue, new revenue for the authority that will come in. The project loan amount is $36,615,700. I don't know if any of this is familiar. Again, representatives from the authorities to get into more detail, and maybe they would do so at the next meeting. But what the cities that will be asked to do is guarantee it. Now, you recall from the lease, the two leases that were entered into, one for water, one for sewer, between the city and the authority, called for the city to guarantee loans of the authority through Penvest. When there's bonds to be issued, direct loans outside of Penvest, then that's to be done by the city directly, paid for by payments from the authority. So this loan for this biosolids treatment improvement would be a 20-year loan at 1% fixed for that time, plus whatever the construction period is. You should also be aware that it's a little bit unusual. This project is being done through a Guaranteed Energy Savings Act program. So they have actually contracted with a single entity that will provide design, build, oversight for that project under that particular act, where they will have a contract with that private entity to provide or certify that there are savings both in revenues and in reduction in operating costs to the authority that will cover the amount of the debt service in each year. For this loan, as in past loans, there will be what's called a self-liquidating debt report done by the authority's engineer, where the engineer will certify that these revenues coming from these new sources, together with their existing customer base, will be sufficient to cover the payments on the Penvest loan, and therefore this guarantee by the city will not count against your borrowing capacity. The next other guarantee ordinance that would be considered is for the water system, and that's entitled Tipton Plain 9 Mill Run Water Treatment Facilities Ozone System. This is an upgrade to their water treatment facility in that area. The loan amount is $7,500,000. The loan offer is also 20 years, and plus the construction period, and the interest rate is 1% for the first 5 years plus construction, and 1.743% for the remaining 15 years. They're fixed rates. So that would be self-liquidating from water system revenues. It's not a new revenue source. This is, I understand, a first step in dealing with one of their dam renovations. So the two ordinances, each one will approve of a guarantee agreement among the city of the AWA and Penvest, where the city pledges its full faith, credit, and taxing power. Behind it, it also pledges the payments of the lease rentals that the authority pays to the city to pay these, make these payments on these loans and any other future loans that the city has. You recall some of the bond issues that were done were direct city loans. So I think part of that is if the lease were ever, again in Penvest theoretical terms, if the leases were ever terminated, now the revenues are directly those of the city, so it wants those payments to come in as well. So they're covering all their corners, but that's how it'll be reflected in those ordinances. It'll look very much like past Penvest guarantees. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that I can answer with regard to the financing or the ordinances. You'll have copies of those available to you later this week.
Okay, thank you, Jens. Does anybody have any questions for Jens?
I guess I do. So we are guaranteeing these loans through I forget what the language is in the ordinance, the full faith and taxing power of the city. But does that have any effect at all on our credit rating? I don't want to call it credit rating, bond rating.
Bond rating.
Yeah, well, I think, it's hard to, the bond rating, your bond rating has not been affected in the past by these. I can tell you that these engineer certificates, sealed by the engineer, state that the city will not be called upon to make these payments. So, I can't answer these rating agencies because, they go through a complex process. But it has not affected the city's credit rating in the past, and we will take the necessary steps, as we have in the past, to provide comfort to the rating agencies for, dealing with this in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Jens. We appreciate you taking the time to call in and explain and go over that with us.
Well, thank you for your time.
Okay, we'll move on to letter B, COVID-19 CDBG amendment, family services, homeless shelter project. On this one, I mean, we've gotten some previous communications from Ken on this, so I'm okay moving to put this one on our upcoming agenda, if nobody else has anything further to add on it.
Ken, do you have a final number on that through the CDBG?
Just under 600,000, what we're looking at right now. I don't, I could look on my phone for the number, but I think it was 598 and change, but that's taking the COVID-3 money, which is new money, the repurposing of Margaret Avenue, and then a couple of projects that weren't able to be spent out that the community development staff recommend repurposing, one from Nehemiah, the other from Youth Build. So I think if we total it all up, and I have talked to the architect and I've talked to Lisa at Family Services just to make sure this is a putting all of our eggs in one basket kind of approach, but apparently this level of commitment from the city, in addition to the previously allocated community development block grant money, they're fully confident they'll be able to get the first floor homeless shelter project done in a timely fashion. HUD's certainly fine with the project, so I think it's the best available option for the resources at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good use of those dollars for that project, so I support moving forward with this.
There'll be an amendment in November and one in December because of the notice requirements, but I'll let Mary Johnson know that we'll go ahead and set that up, and then by the end of the year we'll have hopefully everything the council needs to do to set the wheels in motion.
Okay, good. Letter C, Transportation Center.
We're coming to the end of the calendar year, and the question before the body is that there doesn't seem to be a line out the door of people anxious to take responsibility to manage the space. What I've said before, and I'll reiterate now, is I don't think the redevelopment authority is particularly well positioned as an entity that meets monthly to deal with day-to-day operational issues related to the operation of a multimodal facility. It just creates a duplicative pathway, and honestly, it ends up with the staff doing the work anyway. But it's something that I think, even if there's a longer term plan of what to do, whether it's the development of Lot 24 or at least until we just find the disposition of the two grant applications that have been or are being made, somebody needs to manage it, and I think that somebody's probably us.
Yeah, I think the city is probably the best suited to take it over. I mean, it's an asset like every other asset in the building or in the city that we own. So I think that is the best, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, we can kind of go through the folks that we've interviewed or had the conversation with. I mean, The redevelopment authority doesn't want it. The parking authority could maybe handle it, but they lack consistent capital. Amtran is probably the transportation entity that could actually probably sufficiently handle the ongoing capital situation. Now, Eric Wolf has made it pretty point clear that he doesn't want it on his plate, but as far as trying to get federal monies or state monies that could help offset some of those ongoing liabilities, I would imagine that Amtran would have better resources available than what we would. I mean, we have a lot riding on this grant. I mean, it's the Hail Mary that we're trying to throw here. I mean, if we don't get this thing, we're going to have some problems with this transportation center. And it's whether it's this structure or we build lot 24, you're going to have on lot 24, you're going to have definitely more startup costs, but then the ongoing costs for something small, manageable, and classy as opposed to big and trashy in the present situation. So, at the end of the day, what are we gaining with this? But we can't just scrap the whole thing.
When do we typically give Amtran our match? What month is that?
Well, it's a budget allocation. I'm not sure Omar's here. I don't know whether we mailed the check, but it's money programmed into the 2021 budget.
Yeah.
It's in the first part of the year.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was in the fall or in the winter, but we're getting fairly close to that time.
Well, there's two decision points. One is just, I don't know that it would be wise to sort of upset at least the paper arrangement that currently exists. I'm simply talking about the practical day-to-day matter because we've made grant applications in partnership with the Redevelopment Authority, with with the other stakeholders. And I think when we see how those grants turn out, there'll be another decision point. But just as a practical matter, I just don't know that it makes sense to charge a redevelopment authority with issues with cleaning or tenant squabbles. I think we can probably come up with a fairly simple agreement that just lets us handle those things directly under the oversight of council, and then that frees the redevelopment authority to actually do like redevelopment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I do think there's probably room for a conversation. Amtran, if it were a transit facility, would be eligible for entirely different funding streams.
So what does that mean?
There's federal money set aside specifically for transit capital, and there's a lot of it. So they would have, when you call it a transit facility, now I guess there's the question of having the train, the passenger rail station and the Greyhound station. But traditionally, FTA is all about multimodal projects, interconnectivity, those kinds of things. So, Amtran would be well positioned to seek funds to redevelop or to use that. I think what we're hearing from Eric Wolf is that they don't have a need for that space at the moment.
So what happens with the conversation from tonight? Are we going to see this continue to be on work session agendas, or do we want to get into the conversation of lot 24 tonight?
I think it's a little early to start those discussions until we see how the grants ride out personally.
And we find out the grants like around March or something like
Well,
that.
I don't know, because typically that takes longer, but with this being a CRA or CFA grant, they meet in November. They have their board meeting in November, so maybe they're going to make these award announcements at their board meeting next month. I don't know. I was going to try to reach out to DCD and get some clarification on if they are going to meet at their board meeting or meet in November for their board meeting, and if they were going to make those grant announcements then.
Yeah.
So we could find out soon.
We have reached out to Amtrak and had some conversations about Lot 24. They're sending us some information on grant opportunities that would be available through federal rail sources that could possibly fund the construction of an alternate site. I mean, I think we can do some work, but at some point, we're at the we need to spend money if we want to move further point. So that's the question for the council is, do you want to start spending money on developing Lot 24 as an alternative? If so, when and how much?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm even prepared to give an answer on that tonight, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
think it's kind of,
I don't
we're at
think
a
I
point
am
where it's
either.
too soon to have that discussion.
I would agree.
My goal with this is just try to get,
Yeah, if I can just chime in, if you can hear me, I mean, I think we're a little bit away yet from making that decision, so.
my goal is just to try to move it off the redevelopment authority's plate, just to simplify our staffing of that entity, because with the planned restructuring and downsizing, we're just gonna have a limited ability, and we just have to squeeze out every efficiency we can. Having extra steps administratively just doesn't make sense for us. So, I mean, I think I could follow up with redevelopment authority, because I've been attending their meetings, and with the city solicitor about some kind of a sort of a deal that moves it off of their plate and onto ours in terms of the routine operational stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Okay, moving on to the 2021 budget.
We did the budget presentation at the council meeting, so everything is now on the table. So wanted to make sure that I guess that this is something we'll just be putting on the work session agenda until the budget's approved, but wanted to build in some time in case there were questions, comments, follow-ups that you want us to do. So we have a draft document now. We don't have any more information on what's going to happen financially. We're a week away from a somewhat significant event economically. So
The second pandemic to hit America.
So if there are things that you want to talk about in terms of budget building, just wanted to make sure we built in an opportunity to do that.
What's the timeline for adopting the budget? It has to be done in December?
Yes.
By the end of December?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there any discussion that anybody would like to have surrounding the budget? Okay.
So that, wait, I do have a clarification on the timeline then. So it would get proposed, or introduced rather, it was already introduced, right?
No.
Mm.
No.
It has to be introduced in the form of an ordinance, which would happen in November, and then the ordinance would be up for adoption in December.
Okay.
So November 9th would be when we introduce?
Yes. And you can still amend it which
Okay.
happened last year, if you
Okay.
recall, in December. Everything is open to amendment up until the moment of adoption.
Okay, that was my question then.
I just looked at that today. We'll be meeting on Monday the 9th instead of Wednesday the 11th because that's Veterans Day. So.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Good catch, Councilman Ickes.
Ken, is there a way for us to get, I guess while we're on the budget, like a breakdown, and it might already be in the budget, and maybe we went over it, but like a list of all of the debt service obligations that we do have by each bond issuance,
Yes, I have
the
that.
schedule?
I have that hot linked on my desktop, so I can send you a copy of that in the morning.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Nope. All right, redevelopment authority and others.
Well, we've talked about the redevelopment authority briefly, but as we take a look at sort of becoming more efficient in and sort of trying to right-size organization. I also went to the Shade Tree Commission meeting. I think it behooves us to look at these boards and commissions and try to, do as much consolidation as possible, just because we have pretty limited staffing. So like in the case of the redevelopment authority, if not for the transportation center, I'm not sure how often it would be necessary for them to meet, but every time we have a board or commission meeting, we have to staff it, we have to prepare for the meeting, we have to attend the meeting, we have to do follow-up, and I think that there's room for a broader conversation. I guess there's also some, if you want to take it one step further, I'm doing some due diligence on the parking authority right now, because their essentially authorization as an authority is up in 2021, so that will be a matter before the council. So I'm just trying to get the audit, the financial information, the list of capital assets, just try to get a better handle on that. But now would be the time to start taking a look at these different bodies and saying, are they necessary? And if so, how do you want them structured, and what tasks do you want to set to them? So starting with the redevelopment authority, absent the transportation center, I'm not sure. And in many jurisdictions, things like redevelopment authority have some kind of funding, like a recordation tax, a transfer tax. There's some kind of revenue stream attached to them. What we have is a body right now that really has no resources available to it. I mean, we have a land bank idea, but we don't have a land bank program absent some kind of funding source. I mean, we can certainly, the redevelopment authority can continue to meet if that's the will of the council, but I think if we're asking citizens to dedicate time out of their busy lives, there should be some kind of meaningful work for them to do.
One of the things that I thought about for the redevelopment authority with staffing moving forward into the next year, I thought that maybe that could be an opportunity for ABCD Corp to get involved as well, since they used to, back in the 80s, they the staff there ran the redevelopment authority before that whole thing happened, and then they got transferred out there. But that could be an option as well if we're looking for staff. I don't know if they would be open to it, but that's a conversation that maybe we could have if they would be willing to provide some staff for the redevelopment authority.
I think it's worth exploring. Does the land bank have to flow through the redevelopment authority?
Yes, because of the legislation that we use, which was Act 33, which allowed redevelopment authorities to designate land bank powers under them.
Okay.
That'll be the big thing if we start reviewing all these authority boards and commissions. There were reasons they were set up. A lot of them had to do with federal or state law. But I agree, it'd be nice to go down through the list and see what we can do with what and consolidate where we can.
Well, I believe there's certain bodies that we're statutorily required to have, like a planning commission and a zoning hearing board, because they're land use decisions that fall to the planning commission, and individuals have a right to appeal, so there has to be an administrative venue for them to make those appeals. So there's certain things we're just not going to get out of. I don't know that we're mandated to have a redevelopment authority, a shade tree commission, or some of the other bodies that we currently have.
I mean, are there projects that the redevelopment authority is currently overseeing or a part of?
The redevelopment authority has some loans out to people, but other than projects, no, just whatever land that the city has available for sale, the redevelopment authority facilitates
Okay.
those transfers. Yeah. But it would be nice to see the redevelopment authority get back to doing redevelopment again, because, there was some successful projects that they helped facilitate back in the day, so it would be nice to see us get back to that again.
It's just a matter of resources. I mean, they can do as much as the council's willing to
To
pay.
allocate.
Yeah.
Because without that, and I don't know, I'm not aware of any land bank transactions since I've been here, so have,
No, we just created the land bank.
A couple years ago.
Yeah,
2018?
maybe. It may have even been not until 2019 that we actually voted on. I don't recall, but yeah, it's new, and yeah, we haven't done any transactions yet with it. In fact, we just got the policies and procedures and all that. We just finalized that last year sometime. So still relatively in its infancy stage.
So for my benefit, since I haven't been here long, there's GADEC and ABCD. So it's a little unusual to have two economic development bodies like that concurrently. So can somebody unpack the history at least to, and did they relate to the redevelopment authority some way?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't know the history. Councilman Kelly could probably give the history on GADEC, but no, they're not directly related to the redevelopment authority.
And Pat Miller is the director of GADEC and ABC, and works for ABC and runs the parking authority?
Yeah, when that whole split happened, that was kind of something that they were voluntold that they were going to manage and oversee. Yeah, I think that's how that came about.
I believe the situation there was ABCD was more of a city and county entity, where GADEC was in something more bent toward like downtown Altoona,
Right.
central Altoona area
Right.
specific. And that would be the difference between the two.
You could view GADEC as kind of like a Main Street partnership kind of
Like
situation.
a downtown development
Yes.
association?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And we don't provide any direct funding, that, to the best of my knowledge, to GADEC or ABCD.
No.
And the parking authority exists under our charter as a body corporate and politic, because they own those assets, which I'm trying to pin down in terms of their parking lots and garages and such. Because back to the transportation center, I believe they're the owner of record, so if there wasn't a lease, the parking authority would own that space and be responsible for it. I mean, if the lease didn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it does have to be renewed, and I believe there's probably a provision, I only glanced through it once, there's a provision for termination of the lease.
Who would have to terminate that though?
I think it's,
It would have to be either the parking authority or the
redevelopment
RA,
authority.
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
It's a 6-month, you have to give a 6-month notice on it. But that, the original lease agreement, because I reviewed this,
yeah.
and it was originally I believe a 40-year term on the original lease agreement, which
With the $300,000 lump sum payment.
they paid that up front, essentially because at the time their transportation center wasn't there. So in essence, it was almost like a ground lease
Yeah.
type thing. And I'm gonna guess, that goes back to, the agreement was dated September 14 of '84. It was supposed to start, the term was supposed to start as soon as the first materials were delivered to start building the structure. Now, I don't have anything as to when exactly that occurred, but it was obviously sometime thereafter. So, 40 years out, you're looking, probably late 2024, early 2025 is when that lease, the first term would expire. And like I said, if we give the redevelopment authority wants to terminate the lease, they can do so, a 6 months notice to the parking authority. That's what the lease provides.
Okay.
So, is there any interest on the council to any kind of dedicated revenue source for the redevelopment authority?
Not right now.
Okay, so
No.
without any resources, it's difficult to expect them. I mean, it'd be, if ABCD is open to staffing them, because they do have statutory authorities that may be handy at some point in the future, so I'm not sure dissolving the redevelopment authority would be,
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think we definitely want to do that. Yeah,
But-
there are powers that the RA has that we simply don't, so that's not something we want to even consider. I don't know, for now,
For now, though, I agree. It makes sense to make the meetings less frequent. What do they meet now? Once a month?
yeah.
That can maybe even go to quarterly, biannually for now until they get
Well,
Headland back.
I will say, we only meet if there is something that does
Oh,
need done,
okay.
so,
That's
yeah.
cool.
So if there's nothing that needs done action-wise, we don't bother getting together, but, I mean, it seems like, outside of managing transportation center stuff,
Yeah.
lately, that's been what we've been meeting to discuss, so.
okay. And the Shade Tree Commission, that exists as a statutory body that the city created. There's no money in the Shade Tree Commission, so other than them getting together, I just don't know that we have the resources to.
Yeah,
Are you
Tom-
asking if we want to fund them directly?
I mean, I think if you're not willing to fund the redevelopment authority, and having been here for December and the fate of the tree millage,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say probably not. There's
Well,
not a tree tax in the
does
city's
that-
future.
That was the best pun I've heard in a long time.
Go out on a limb.
Tom, is there anything that requires us to keep a shade tree commission or have anything like that, in Pennsylvania law?
I mean, I haven't specifically, I don't believe there is. I can certainly double check that, but I don't
Okay.
believe there is.
And even for now, just to sort of phase it one way or the other, they too could go from meeting once a month to quarterly or biannually or
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
make
as
it an
needed.
as needed schedule.
Yeah. Are there members of the Shade Tree Commission as we speak?
Yes,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and they emphasize that they learned a great deal, including not to plant a monoculture of all the same trees. So if those trees get some kind of disease, they all die. So, they're concerned about, I think it's the elms that we have, or ashes, maybe it's the ashes with the emerald borer.
Yeah.
But we have some
Yeah.
trees that receive treatment. So I asked them to put together a list of things that they'd like Public Works to do. But again, as a body that just meets as needed to consult on an issue, it's certainly fine to keep them, but there's no money for them to do any projects,
Mhm.
plantings or those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that it really is about the funding, because the people that serve on these boards do a great job. They take a lot of time to learn the ropes of what's going on these different authorities, and they take upon themselves a lot of responsibility too, and get very involved and do great community service. And so it would be best to best utilize their time appropriately.
Yeah, if we're gonna ask a private person to come in and spend their time, we wanna make sure we're respecting that by giving them valuable work. And that, not long ago, I looked at the city's strategic goals from 2007 and 2008, and they're good goals, but it was really more of a letter to Santa Claus than it was an operational plan, because everything has to have outcomes, and every outcome has to be tied to resources in terms of cost, and everything has a cost in time or personnel or some kind of investment. And it's just about trying to, when we started out in the pre-COVID, talked a little bit about your strategic goals. Now what we're trying to do is take a look at our structure to make sure that not only the organization internally, but our bodies and commissions are aligned to meet those goals that you have. And also, where do you want to put your limited resources? Because if we're not willing to invest funds in it, we're wasting people's time. But I'll be meeting with the redevelopment authority, and I don't think that they, if I understand it, will not miss managing the transportation center even a little bit. So we'll handle it.
Thank you. All right, moving on to repository bids.
And that's one where we want to bring Rebecca out. This is Councilman Butterbaw's signature issue.
Yeah, the issue with this is having served 10 years on the Blighted Property Committee, a lot of times you'll have land speculators from across the country just get on the websites and bid for these empty lots or lots that maybe have blighted buildings on them or such, and they have nobody around here if something happens. And I understand the county's argument and their perspective, and their argument is, well, we just want to get it on the tax rolls. But in a speculatory land buyer situation, if they're not going to make a profit, they're just going to walk away and not pay taxes anyway, and then the municipalities, and in our case the city, has to do all the babysitting, and it ends up costing dollars in staff time, and it just gives our codes people more headaches than are necessary. So I've always been of the ilk, when we research these, I'll call the people that the county, that give the county their contact information, and I'll just try to get out of them, hey, if somebody needs to get a hold of you, who's here to fix it, or are you able to take care of this property? And a lot of times you can't get a hold of them, or you can't get a straight answer out of them, and so we just vote no, which at times people say, well, you shouldn't vote no unless you have a really good reason. Well, yeah, we're the ones elected to vote. We're the ones. I wouldn't want somebody owning a piece of property right next to my house, or wouldn't want to impose upon anybody, any kind of hazard of somebody that can't come and take care of their own land. And so we just are trying to be wise with who we agree to allow to buy these properties. If there's somebody that has somebody in the vicinity, they don't even have to be around here, but they should have somebody that is able to manage the property or be responsible for that property. And so that's what I look for when I do the research, and that's why you get a lot of no votes. And I encourage you guys, and I do commend you guys, because you do agree oftentimes that, yeah, let's wait another month, or let's see what's going on with this property. So with that said, I also agree with let's make did I filibuster long enough there? Good.
Sorry.
So I also agree with perhaps coming up with an ordinance or a resolution that would have some criteria. Okay, if you want to do this and you want city council to agree with allowing this conveyance to go through, then we want A, B, C, and D, or whatever we come up with. Yeah.
I think with the repository bids, statutorily, there is a provision in there, giving each taxing authority the ability to reject or accept it. And that just says if you reject it, your approval can't be unreasonably withheld. So, as the statute reads, I think whether, we have a policy in place, where, it's a policy, or if you want to do it by ordinance, I don't think you have to necessarily do an ordinance, but like just an established policy that you consistently apply. I think that, for a repository bid, the city can say, we reject the bid, and this is why. I think you got to articulate why.
Yeah.
At that point, if the county or the prospective bidder wants to try to challenge that, at the court of common pleas, they certainly can. And as I've indicated, I've researched the issue. The case law doesn't give like a bright line rule as to what's reasonable or unreasonable in this situation. As I read it, I think the city can make a reasonable argument for on the rationale you've described. And I would be willing to put that in front of a judge and let him or her decide the issue. I think we were talking, so repository bids, I think we do have something we can do. I think the upset in the upset in the judicial sale, that's another matter. I think that's, you can't really do much there just based on the language of the statute.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So I think some of the question from reading emails too is that to make sure that we're doing the exact same approach, if we're going to turn down a repository bid, then we're not accused of favoring one over the other.
Right.
Is that something that we should get out ahead of, I think is really what you're saying, Vice Mayor Rubel, right, is to have an ordinance up front that we can kind of point to and say, instead of the vague wordage.
I mean,
it's
yeah.
just- It's reasonable.
I think you just need to have it like somewhere, you know, whether that's by, you know, established policy, resolution, ordinance, whatever, you know, something which, that you are consistently following.
Yeah.
Because like I said, the statute does not say if you reject it, you have to do so by ordinance or follow an ordinance or, you know, that's all I'm saying.
So we just have to show a consistent basis. Sorry, so we just have to show a consistency.
Yeah, I think, because if I'm a judge listening to this and we're outlining, hey, we want X, Y, and Z, I'm sure one of the things would be like, okay, do you consistently utilize this process? So,
I like an ordinance because, you know, having been to court a few times, judges tend to give more weight to laws adopted by a legislative body than the policies that have been created administratively. It goes through a public hearing process. There's black letter law in front of them, and then particularly if you want to, you know, one of the things that Rebecca's talked about is like a local agent requirement, which is if you're going to buy this property, someone has to be designated, and if there's not a local property manager or agent, it can be rejected automatically. That would allow us to winnow out some things. The other thing about repository sales, that we can work really hard to get ready to demo a property, and we just don't get it done, and
Yep.
then the whole thing has to
Right.
hit the reset button, which means that we end up duplicating our work over and over. But I also think that when it comes to some of these things, there's room for some creativity in terms of if you buy a property that has code violations, the city can require some kind of bond of performance against those violations being cured or the property being demoed. It allows us to sort of hang things on that tree to try, because ultimately the outcome that we want here is the property not to just sort of flip from speculator to speculator. We want to fix the property, get it back on the tax rolls, and not have it be a chronic headache for us, which Rebecca can speak to much more conclusively than I can.
Do we have a process of proposal, like, you know, that when I buy this property as a bidder, that I'm gonna, you know, this is my proposed action that I'm gonna take on it?
They're not required to submit anything like that right now. The county doesn't require them to prior to bidding, and obviously they haven't been very positive in the talks that we've had with them that they would want to join with us in something like that.
Change anything at all?
No, so, and that was with, actually, when we talked to them, we had spoken with them 2 years ago, several times, and we had discussed changes to make, everything basically, you know, flow better, but really as a protection for us, for the other residents, and, that was with both the tax sale properties, judicial sale, and repository. So we were actually just trying to get something for, you know, even if one was okay, but we had initially started to talk about all 3 sales. But those talks just weren't successful.
Yeah,
They
mine
just want
wasn't
it back on the-
exactly.
Yeah, they just want it back on the tax
Yep.
rolls, but then it's us at the local level and
And
municipalities,
with
we have to
the-
clean the mess up.
With the real estate tax law change in 2018, and Attorney Finn probably understands this too. We were now required anything that enters the repository after, that entered the repository after June of 2018, the city is responsible for the maintenance and upkeep.
Yes.
So anything that's still in there, and a majority of the properties that are still in there for sale are vacant lots.
Yeah.
But you still have,
What's the repository process if somebody wants to submit a bid?
I actually got the info off of their website. It's really just 2 pages. It's a bidder verification, and you have to give your name and mailing address and your driver's license number.
So
You
there's,
have-
I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no. You have to confirm that you don't have any unpaid real estate taxes. And then you just have to give the property description on another, I mean, it's a pretty simple process.
So
My-
there's nothing though that anybody submits to you?
And that's one of the things that we tried to establish with those discussions.
That's, yeah,
And they were not in favor of that.
right,
They,
yeah,
they
yeah.
felt, quite honestly, and the discussion, you know, kind of leaned towards, they didn't want to do anything that would stall or halt any sales because, you know, that was going to be them losing possibly the sale.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
misses the whole point. Because they're the ones we vote no on anyway. They weren't going to get a dime from anyway. And why we can't get that through to them, I don't know. And then I forget who it was, and they're like, well, you can't vote no. And I'm like, watch me vote no. And nobody's come back on us since, because when you're voting no on a property nobody cares about to begin with, unless they can speculate and make money. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head how many different states I've called over the years, because you get those 2 sheets of the criteria that the mayor was asking about, and they'll have like a picture of their driver's license, and then you'll get like a Wyoming number, so you call there and you might get somebody, you might not, or California, Florida, or all points in between. So that's really the only due diligence we could do, is call the contact they give, and half the time they don't pick up the phone, or when you do start talking to them, they're all of a sudden defensive and thinking, "Ooh, the law is catching up with me," or something, and they hang up on you.
And they definitely don't offer information.
No, they don't.
I mean, we have Googled,
No.
searched many people,
Yes.
and they won't offer any information if you do make contact with somebody. So it's difficult.
Rebecca, can I ask you how frequently the issue comes across your desk of these like absentee?
In the repository, for
Yeah.
properties in the repository, I want to say at least a quarter of the sales are for out-of-town property owners, I would say.
I'm sure.
I mean, you do get lucky where, you know, you have an owner who wants to pick up the side yard for, you know, to extend their side yard beautification purposes, and that's always a plus. I mean, we hope for that. But sometimes, and we have no idea why, somebody from Wyoming would want a vacant 25 by 120 lot. We don't know. And that lot subsequently, you know, if it's littered with debris or the sidewalk in front of it, you know, it's snow removal, we're the ones taking care of that.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in college, I worked for the county for a summer, and that's all we did was cut repository properties
Yeah.
and cleaned up dog crap.
And that's where the situation gets really tough, because you have Rebecca and her department doing all this work, and you finally start to get to the finish line. And one of the worst cases is when you have a blighted building on it, and you get to the point where you have the CDBG money in place. You're going to raise it. The neighbors are going to be happy, and then the county sells it to somebody 3,000 miles away. And then you got to start all over again, and you got to wait 2 years to be able to do anything with it, which is so frustrating. And so anything we could do to prevent that nonsense, I'm all for.
And I'll say, like I said, as far as what the county is doing or requiring is consistent with what the statute says.
Oh yeah, they're
Yeah.
not breaking any
You
You
laws.
know, so I mean, I've seen some things with other counties. They may say there's a minimum bid requirement or some other requirements. And from what I saw, the prior discussions before I was around, you know, the county questioned really could you know, add these additional requirements beyond what the statute says, which, you know, I mean, that's a legitimate question, but then they raise the practical issue of how many people are going to really fight it. Like I said, with the repository bids, I think the statute does give you the right to reasonably refuse it. If you're going to go the route of like adopting an ordinance to deal with, I think it's important to tailor it to just how the city considers the repository bids.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if, you know, whether it's policy or ordinance, whatever, if under the facts of that particular circumstance, a judge were to determine, I think you're in this situation, you're being unreasonable, you know, the judge would still have the authority to overturn it. So.
And I don't think that is reasonable, to be honest, because when we met with the county, one of the Winnie Branton, who was our blight consultant, one of the examples that she brought with her was from Berks County, who was doing a similar thing there with a repository bidder registration thing, you know, so it's being done right now in other Pennsylvania counties, so I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, if you're asking me, do I think it's unreasonable? I don't, but, you know, that's gonna be in the eyes of the beholder. So.
Although, at least, you know, in my experience, when a judge has something like this and an elected body has made a decision about reasonable or not, it's unusual for a judge to substitute his or her judgment for an elected body's on what's essentially a discretionary exercise of authority like that. I mean, I mean, not to say it hasn't happened, but it's, you know, I mean, the weight is on you as a body, and I agree with the solicitor. We can't impose requirements on the county, but the county can't dictate terms to us as to what is reasonable or not in your purview.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm good moving forward with some sort of policy or, you know, something that gives us some sort of extra layer of oversight in these dealings.
I would too. I feel like it gets us out ahead of it, and it already sets that precedent, because if we're gonna say that we're being consistent, it means we're gonna have to do this several times before we can show the history of consistency. So I'd be in favor of that too.
And I really believe we're helping the county because we want it on the tax rolls for real, not just some fraudulent sale that the poor municipality is going to have to babysit for another 2 years. We want people that actually care and are going to at least pay the taxes.
Yeah, and it's an attempt to do our part to protect our neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
I mean, because you have a situation like that, it takes one situation like that for the whole block to start to go, and then you have a real problem.
Well, and the city would have absolutely like a reasonable interest in, you know, curbing blight, and if this is an attempt to do that.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that-
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're asking me, yeah,
Well,
I think
yeah,
I think
I
it's
am.
reasonable. You know, one of the other factors too, particularly when you're dealing with a vacant lot, I know, like, you know, the county will regularly say, well, we just want to get this back on the tax roll. Well, you know, a small vacant lot, you know, how much tax revenue is that really generating? You know, you're doing a cost benefit analysis, like, you know, well, yeah, it's on your tax rolls, but really what is each taxing body receiving revenue-wise in comparison, like you said, as Rebecca said, with the city, if it's in the repository, we're taking care of this thing already, you know? So,
Well, we're responsible. That's the key. The
Yeah.
county can sell it to whoever,
sure.
and then it's our baby.
Yep.
And
Right,
so
pick up right, we have to pick up the slack on it, and that's, you know, that's a big part of why we were voted in too, is to, you know, to speak for the neighbors and for the constituency, like Councilman Nickus was saying, so.
And I think there's
I
some
think
room.
getting out ahead of this is definitely the best move that we can make.
I think there's some room for some creative thinking about differentiating between properties that are vacant and structures, particularly structures that are either failing, have failed, or have outstanding code violations. So I think there's more we need to do with the structures. In terms of the vacant lots, I don't think it would be a bad idea to automatically approve repository bids from adjoining property owners who simply want to expand the footprint of their property and potentially agree to abate the difference in taxes for a period of time if their taxes were to go up, to try to incentivize property owners, because we lose money and so does the county mowing vacant lots.
absolutely.
Why not create a positive incentive for people to expand the footprint of their property, acquire it, and maintain it themselves? Because I don't know this for certain, but I understand people who live next to these lots routinely use them. They just don't pay for them.
Right, and most of them are already maintaining them.
Yeah.
Most of them are already cutting the
That's
grass.
right.
A lot of them already have swing sets on these lots that aren't even theirs, you know, but they've basically adopted them as if they are already there. So
Swing
a lot of
sets,
people would
sheds.
happily take ownership of these lots if
Yeah.
we offered them to them.
Well, that would be the goal, is to try to get them, at some point, I guess theoretically, it would increase the value of their property to have a double lot versus a single lot, which I believe that may trigger a reassessment at some juncture. And we're only one of the 3 taxing authorities.
Right.
But I think it's worth trying to look at some positive
We're
incentives.
not
for
triggering
people.
no reassessment.
Well, I mean, if you,
Yeah.
but I honestly don't know. If you acquire a vacant lot next to yours and consolidate it to a larger lot, does that change your assessed value?
Oh, yeah.
They would know
Yeah.
automatically when you merge.
Yeah, anytime
Right.
land conveys, the county has to, it goes through the register and recorder, and then they take it down to the GIS, and then they end up sending it to us every month, so everybody's in the know when it conveys.
I think working with the solicitor, or Rebecca, can draft something for your consideration for the next work session.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. All right, moving on to handicap parking permits. This one was something that I asked Dan to look into last year after getting some calls from people who purchase handicap signs for in front of their homes. But when they do that, they're not reserved for them. So anybody that has a handicap tag on their car is able to park there. So what this ordinance would do is it would basically it would make the handicap sign that that person pays for, that they would only be the one allowed to use it. So yeah, there was
I would support that.
okay.
So does it become like a permit number or?
That's, I think if we get Janice out just quickly, because the good thing about the current situation is if you don't have a handicap plate or placard, you get a ticket if you park in the handicap zone. The issue then becomes, and this is one I'd want at least the solicitor to do a double check on, can you tell a handicap person that they can't park in a marked handicap zone because they don't have the right permit number? Because if somebody who's handicapped, who's legally authorized to park in it, can you say, oh, that's not your handicap spot, it's somebody else's handicap spot? Which I mean, because if they complain, it goes to Department of Justice, and it gets real serious real fast over a violation of the rights under the ADA. So I would want to make sure that we weren't setting it up, and also like just to make sure Janice, because if you see a car there, it looks like it's got valid tags on it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fine. I mean, those were things that I did those things. I mean, Dan drafted that ordinance, so obviously it was legal, or else he wouldn't have done that. I did talk it over with Janice as well prior to, or Chief Freeling. But I mean, I would be happy to hear their input as well, and I mean, it wouldn't hurt to get Tom's
Sure.
a second glance at it either.
So the permit number has to match with the.
Well, not necessarily the permit number, but just whoever's home it is, because it's for people who have handicap spaces at their homes. It's $100 a year license to get that for your house. And if you have a handicap neighbor as well who does not pay the $100 a year, and we do have a few situations that I've had to repeatedly talk to these people, who have somebody who they're paying for the handicap spot, and if they don't get home from work before their neighbor does, they can't park in front of their home. So, I mean, it is an issue.
Because
and it's not because somebody else with a
with the
handicap
handicap
tag is,
parks in front of their house.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not fair. That person is paying for that handicap tag. That tag should be theirs to use and solely theirs to use.
Yeah, I agree.
I realize there's a cost involved in issuing it, but if the rub is charging people, a handicapped person, $100 for a sign in front of their house, I mean, once they pay for the sign, we realize this is revenue, but if you paid for the sign, should we keep charging them $100 a year for a handicapped space in front of their house? I mean, I understand that, it's a handicap person.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think those are some good internal discussions that we should have. Mhm.
Yeah, I understand where Ken's going.
Yeah.
Get what it costs to get it set up, and once it's set up, you're good.
Right.
Because otherwise it's like
Yeah, I don't know
we're
what.
taxing handicapped people.
Yeah, we
which
can't
is-
be doing that.
I'm a little uneasy with that.
Yeah.
Oh,
We need a remote, like Mike, we can throw it at whoever's coming out. Yeah.
So I just heard you guys in the back. The
Get on the mic.
the cost of the sign to install is $100.
Okay.
The cost per year to administer the permit that you have to pay for is $25, I believe, right now. So that's all.
Thank you
So,
for clarifying that.
I do have a question real quick. So do they get an additional permit, like along, because everybody gets like the handicap placard, but is there an additional like window sticker that has a number or anything like that, or are we just?
No.
Okay.
All you get for the $20 is you just register the spot, so you get a little sticker on the back of the sign that says, like for this year, 2020,
Oh,
that it's
okay.
taken care of. Because we get a lot of renters, we get a lot of transients that come and go, and then so we go out and then pull the sign when the person
no
doesn't
longer
pay for the.
So the first year we cleared $75, and every year thereafter we have the whole $100.
No.
No.
We only pay, they only pay 25
25.
after. It's $100 for the installation. It's two guys that go out with a core drill, core the curb, put the post, put the sign, then it's 25 on years after that.
It's a little unusual. I mean, this is the first city I've been that does, I mean, normally on-street parking is sort of first come, first served, and the only place you see handicap accessible spaces are in private parking lots. It's unusual for a city to stripe ADA spaces on streets.
We're not striping them, it's just a metal sign that goes
Well, or
in along
signing
the
them,
curb.
or
Yeah.
We take our parking seriously here in Altoona.
See, in the winters, you'll see stoves put out on the side of the road as the, shovel out.
And chairs, and chairs.
Yeah. Street chairs.
So you're saying there's neighborhoods where it's worth getting like hit by a bus for the parking space? I mean,
We take parking seriously.
Okay.
All right, so as far as this goes though, Tom, you're gonna look at it again
Yes.
and, okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the urban redevelopment study. That's one that, that we included in the budget last year as part of a bigger project to look at for Margaret Avenue and the area in and around Beale Avenue. You know, I think that's one that probably, as Ken recommended, that we should just postpone that and put that money back into the general fund for use, because there's not going to be anything in this coming year or probably next year either that would move anything else further along there. So I think that's worth waiting and just postponing anything there.
I'm okay with that.
if we don't spend it, it goes to general unrestricted reserves and rolls
Right.
into the next year.
Yep.
All right. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to our good friends from Atlantic Broadband.
Well, in fairness, Atlantic Broadband has reopened its customer service center, and they've also upgraded the broadcast of our information from analog to digital. So much as we take Atlantic Broadband to task publicly when they fall short, which is fairly frequent for its customers, I think it's only fair that in turn we publicly thank them for resolving those two issues. On the hold call time issue, I've been in touch with some other municipalities in Pennsylvania who are also unhappy about the wait times, and I've asked Fran with Atlantic Broadband to provide us with some data, because there are customer service standards in the 1992 Cable Act that have performance requirements for answering the phone, not being on hold. Clearly, we're not meeting those, or at least Atlantic Broadband isn't meeting them. So if there's something further you want to do with that, just wanted to make sure I put it on the agenda for your guidance.
Yeah, they were willing to come to town and talk to us, so
Yeah.
we got them to come here and had the discussion and got the office open, so.
I understand there's been a line because they only think they let one person at a time.
Oh, wow.
So
But I've had some feedback, and people are very happy to have their
Mhm.
service center read.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, has been nice.
I mean, in some instances, it was probably quicker to walk to Atlantic Broadband than it would be to call them.
Would be for me. Where I live, I could walk there, get what I need, and get back home before they'd answer the phone.
All right, does anybody have anything else on that? Move on to mayor and council open discussion. Does anybody have anything they would like to add?
One of the things we were saying about the Veterans Day Parade is moved to November 7th. I believe that's a Saturday. It's not on the 11th this year. And so keep that in mind.
We did have a citizen request asking you to consider postponing Halloween.
No.
No.
The short answer is no. The long answer is no.
With respect, I mean, it just doesn't, it's not feasible. I don't think, and you articulated this, and I thank you for the suggestion. But people would be out anyway on Thursday, so
Yes.
I think it'd create more confusion than it would.
Yeah, and I mean, we have what, 23 other municipalities in the county.
Yeah,
think
I mean,
it would just
the
be a lot
sheriff's
to-
office actually has a big say in the date as well, don't they? I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
they,
We kind of plan for it.
sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, but it's true. All the Blair County municipalities work around the same set schedule. So, I mean, even if we would postpone ours, you know, everybody else is probably likely still going to go forward with it. So it would just create more confusion than anything else.
Altoona kids take their trick-or-treating as serious as adults take their parking. Got to keep that in mind.
And I'll be curious to see how many folks took the recommendation of Manager Decker on getting the full-size Butterfinger bars.
Yeah. People will remember you years from now. But I certainly understand any parent who wants to take their children trick-or-treating and it looks like it's going to be cold and a pretty miserable evening, and I want residents to know if you call and ask us a question, it will go to the mayor and council. You know, much like prayer, sometimes the answer is no. But we'll get back to her. We'll try to explain it more thoroughly if she has any additional questions. But I appreciate the spirit and the intent. You want every holiday to be special for your kids. It's just, and as long as they get lots of candy, I'm pretty sure it's going to be special. Full size.
All right, now we'll move on to questions from the media.
Thank you. Isn't there a shade tree millage currently?
There at least used to be.
No, there isn't, Bill.
It's
No.
been eliminated. When was it eliminated?
It was eliminated when the county, when the city went into home rule charter
Okay.
and levied it under a just general millage.
Could somebody explain what this, what the outcome of the discussion on the transportation center, what's the latest, I guess, with that?
It's still ours.
Yeah, we're taking it out of the hands of the redevelopment authority and just sort of managing it in-house. And so it alleviates the redevelopment authority from having to meet just to worry about the transportation center. And then as things progress with the land bank and different ideas of that ilk that are more related to what a redevelopment authority should be doing, then they can be meeting and doing redevelopment things instead of managing the transportation center.
Okay, so that won't require anything formal for that to happen? The city takeover, so to speak, or the staff?
What do you ask? What was the question?
You're asking if it requires a resolution or or an ordinance?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
No, I mean, you're not taking over the lease. It's just managing day-to-day affairs of it, so.
Okay. So it's a done deal pretty much, based on the consensus here?
I can hear the redevelopment authority partying from here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Regarding the discussion on the ADA parking signs, is there, what is the initial charge and what is the annual charge?
$100 for installation and then $25 per year thereafter.
Oh, okay, so that's pretty much in line with what you had suggested before you realized that's what kind of actually is happening?
I initially thought we were charging $100 per year, but that's not the case. It's $25. So the initial cost is the $100 up front, and then it's $25 per year, because I guess that's the cost of the $25 is the cost for the annual sticker.
So everybody's okay with that, it's just that you're gonna try to make the change so that people can have their own personal spot in front of their house?
Yeah, so the spot in front of your house would be yours specifically as opposed to fair game.
Right. Who gets home first?
The person who pays for it will get to park there.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha. And then finally, why did the person who called about wanting to postpone Halloween or treating want to do that? Why did they want that?
I think
Because of projected weather.
they have concerns over the weather being cold and rainy,
Oh,
and
okay.
just a kind of an inconvenience for a night of candy gathering.
Right. And when did they want to go to? Is it-
I forget the date that you.
She offered a couple of alternatives.
I think she was saying the 30th and the 31st.
Yeah.
Did they say why they wanted to change?
Yeah, weather.
Because of the weather, it's projected to be a cold rain, which is not uncommon for central Pennsylvania in October.
It's also not good candy gathering weather.
It's not, but there's, who knows if it'll be a cold rain on the day we'd postpone it to, so.
I think
Hey, look,
last year was pretty cold too.
I'll be out gathering
Put your
candy.
turtlenex
So.
on.
We did have
Ruin
a
your
year where
costumes,
that,
put
what
your
was it, that
turtlenecks on.
hurricane rain was coming or something like that, and we almost did have to switch it to 1 year.
That was
It has
Sandy,
been-
wasn't
We
it?
did
It has
last
been
year.
postponed,
Was
yeah.
that last year?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Just recently.
but not for.
Hey, this is 2020. This has been like a
Like
dog
torrential
year.
down.
This has been like 7 years.
That's all, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.